right, so we're going to talk Cancer Sun, Libra Moon. The opera singers with attitude and the balladeers with business sense. The street smart melody, the family melody, and the street smart fairy tale. And we're going to use a little bit of a unusual example, which is the film, the NWA biopic, straight out of Compton. If you're new to astrology, or if your astrological literacy has yet to fully express itself, you might be wondering, well, wait a minute, what do you mean you're going to use a film? Well, one of the great things about astrology is you can use it for pretty much anything. So if you want to teach yourself astrology or enhance your understanding of it, just look up the charts of your favorite films, and then you can use those charts to better understand it, particularly if it's a movie that you have an emotional connection with. So the one caveat is you have to make sure that you actually get the actual debut, so not like the theatrical release. You can usually do that on imdb.com, but sometimes you may have to do a little extra research. So actually, Strata Compton's a good example of that. It was the big theatrical release was on a new moon in Leo, conjunct Venus retrograde in Leo. And if you look at if you're watching this online, the photo you're probably looking at has got all the Leo-ine traits. But the film itself is actually Cancer Sun, Libra Moon. Okay. And it's a phenomenal example, as you'll see in just a second. So, using its first public screening, July 21st, 2015 at 7:30 p.m. in Philadelphia, as its date of birth. The NWO biopic Straight Outta Compton has its sun's identity in Cancer, the sign of family, and its moon, which is its needs, in Libra, sign of melodies, sign of justice. The film documents the rise and fall of an ad hoc family of rappers, best remembered for justice-minded melodies, so controversial they drew the ear of everybody from FBI and focused on the family to Oprah Winfrey and Tipper Gore. It's one of the most anticipated musical biopics in history, and as coincidence would have it, astrologer Linda Goodman describes the biographical arc of the Cancer-Libra pairing in distinctly musical terms. In her 1978 book Lovestein, she writes, quote, "For a while this can be a melodious scene. Libra adores laughter, and the humor of Cancer becomes a rhythmical lyric to the mellow music of Libra's Venus essence. Smooth and restful at times, yet also containing crashing chords and sour notes, punctuated by a kind of rocky roll. It's pure entertainment, and fortunate indeed are the innocent bystanders, brightened by the musical duets of this combo while they're getting along. The innocent bystanders should enjoy it while it lasts." End quote. True to Miss Goodman's description of the Cancer-Libra pairing, Straight Outta Compton's most enjoyable scenes are those depicting the group's melodiously ribald musical performances. Those performances, all of which take place during the first half of the film, combine the smoothly restful, rhythmically mellow, proto-G-funk style of Dr. Dre, of his producing abilities, with the crashing intensity of Ice Cube's lyrical genius, all punctuated by the menacing irreverence of Eazy-E's high-pitched rock and roll street drawl. The result is pure entertainment. In contrast, the second half of the film focuses on what happens when the musical duets stop and the disputes over money begin. By the end of the film, those disputes have left a trail of innocent bystanders in their wake. Wives and girlfriends, business partners, even Eazy-E himself. In his book Moon Phases, astrologer Raven Caldera describes the combination of Cancer Sun with Libra Moon as the Black Knight, for whom, quote, "Idealism has turned to anger. Hopes have been betrayed by the cruelty of unjust people. Anger explodes, and the Black Knight takes justice into his own hands. He knows that he is not working for the man, as it were. He is aware that he is outside the law, but considers the law corrupt." End quote. As per Caldera's description of the Cancer-Libra pairing, the subjects of Straight Outta Compton are entirely aware that they are outside the law, but they consider the law corrupt. Their anger at the injustice meted out by the deeply corrupted LAPD explodes into music too powerful to be ignored. They have the authority to kill a minority. Lyricist-in-chief Ice Cube hollers in F the Police, the group's 1988 protest anthem, as relevant to the Obama years as it was to the Reagan era. As far as the fashion goes, the group favors the all-black attire of the LA Raiders, professional football team. The Raiders are basically knights, and they dress in all black. Just like Caldera says at the Black Knights. None of the young men own any horses like the knights of old, but their leader, Eazy-E, is known for cruising around town in a 1964 model Chevy Impala, a high-performance vehicle that is to rap musicians of his era what destrier charging horses were to knights of medieval times. He even records a hit song about it, the film's depiction of which is both wryly humorous and deeply humanizing. Members of NWA may not be Caldera's Black Knights in the literal sense of the word, but the film does depict them as low-rider driving anti-heroes who speak out about police brutality at a time when public discussions of such matters was kept under the tight control of corporate media. The film even engages in a bit of family, that's cancer, lawyering, that's Libra. In one scene, Ice Cube responds to a reporter's criticism of the group's lyrics by citing the Constitution. Freedom of speech includes rap music. We're exercising our First Amendment rights as far as I'm concerned, he says. He and Eazy-E didn't explain that the parties alleged to be responsible for gang warfare and the crack epidemic may not be the ultimate culprits they're made out to be. Cocaine comes from Colombia. AKs come from Russia. AK-47 assault rifles. But none of us have a passport, so you might want to check the source, they adroitly observe. In their book, Sunshine Moonshine, Susie and Charles Harvey tell us that a image for integration for the Cancer Libra pairing is, quote, Mother Goose recites a poem surrounded by adoring fairy tale creatures, end quote. As strange as it may sound, that's actually an excellent metaphoric approximation of Straight Outta Compton. The film's operative scene takes place inside a rented recording studio where Eazy-E recites the lyrics to Boys in the Hood, a bass-heavy urban folk poem that would become legendary for its depiction of life on the streets of Los Angeles at the height of the drug war. Eazy-E isn't Mother Goose per se, but the film does portray him as a business-minded midwife to a group of artists whose life stories have taken on such mythological levels of significance that the film is now the #1 grossing musical biopic of all time. By the way, speaking of Boys in the Hood, the movie originally, the film, was originally intended to star the members of NWA, and I think they had broken up by the time they started filming, or they were having some type of problems by that point, so it ended up only being Ice Cube was the only one who ended up in the film. Just a little side note there. So, while both critically acclaimed and commercially successful, Straight Outta Compton is not without some serious shortcomings. Astrologically, it's a good example of the Cancer Libra pairing's tendency to deny or ignore uncomfortable issues out of existence even as it confronts others. Most notably, NWA's rampant misogyny and homophobia are left unquestioned, where Dr. Dre's vicious beating of music journalist Dee Barnes is left unmentioned. The contributions of all-star girl group JJ Fad are conveniently written out of the film, even though it was money and acclaim from their hit song Supersonic that established the group's label as a legitimate player within the music world. With a few brief exceptions, women are depicted as little more than, well, I can't say it if this is going to air on the radio, but the B word, then hoes and house whores, okay? This is a systemic and not insignificant blight on what at times is one of the most emotionally moving, that's Cancer, justice-minded, Libra, films in recent memory. Certainly for me, it's one of the more emotionally moving films in recent memory. All right, Saturn and Scorpio, planet of challenges in the sign of sex and death. Straight Outta Compton's sun, its identity, at 28 degrees of Cancer, that's family, receives a supportive contact from Saturn, it's a planet of structures, 28 degrees Scorpio, which is a sign of underworlds. The from beginning to end, the film is structured at Saturn around a series of underworlds. Scorpio starts in the underworld of a South Central Los Angeles dope house, where we see a drug deal between friends that go from bad to worse to even worse. It ends in another underworld, the AIDS ward of Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. In between is structured around the psychological underworlds of backroom business deals and joint financial transactions. Early in the film, a closed-door agreement between Eazy-E and NWA manager Jerry Heller is depicted as financially shortchanging other members of the group. Later, the strong-arm tactics utilized by Death Row Records CEO Suge Knight prompt Eazy-E to consider having Knight assassinated, a course of action Heller dissuades him from pursuing. In his book, Myth Astrology, astrologer Raven Caldera associates Saturn and Scorpio with the myth of Ceridwen. Now, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but Ceridwen, it's Ceridwen, it's a Celtic goddess who assists others by regenerating slain corpses in her cauldron. Nobody depicted in Straight Outta Compton is able to regenerate corpses, but we do see Dr. Dre persuade Eazy-E to invest money acquired from the corrosive dead end that is the crack trade into a cauldron of smoking hot musical acts that end up cracking the top of the charts. Now, there's no voodoo or magic in the film, but turning money accrued from an industry backed by bullets made of lead into records made of gold certainly qualifies as something akin to alchemy. Alright, we're going to move on to the film's North Node. Alright, so North Node is your ultimate mission should you choose to accept it. And Straight Outta Compton was released when the North Node was in Libra, which is the other side to the story, but it's also the other side to the other side of the story. Straight Outta Compton was released as transiting North Node. The point of destiny was in Libra, the sign responsible for providing the other side of the story. In many ways, the film accomplishes its North Node directive, as there are numerous scenes in which we see police violence depicted from the other side of the boot or battering ram. It's in these moments that the film operates as effective counter-programming to officially sanction narratives regarding the application and misapplication of justice, Libra, in our culture. At the same time, even compelling counter-narratives often require additional counter-narratives if justice is to be truly served, which is the goal of a Libra North Node. And in regards to the counter-narrative offered by Straight Outta Compton, most reviewers have chosen to look the other way when it comes to the group's appalling dehumanization of women and the film's near total erasure of them. However, a few voices have come forward with counter-narratives to the counter-narratives. For instance, in an interview published by the Huffington Post, Sikuvu Hutchinson reminds us that NWA was quote, instrumental to the normalization of terroristic, misogynistic violence against black women and girls, end quote. Writing in the Washington Post, journalist Jamila Lamu acknowledges the film's cinematic brilliance, but explains that the current mobilization against police violence is, quote, far less driven by rap and rappers than it is by black women, end quote. Critics and fans who celebrate the group's anti-authoritarian valor, but fail to question the injustice of music that treats black women as disposable commodities are thus missing the other half of the story, she points out. Okay, so, yeah, that's basically my take on the film. I would have to agree with that assessment. I thought it was great as a film, and there's particularly some scenes, and I'm going to give a little additional information about some of the scenes. I thought it was great in a lot of ways, but at the same time, you know, you can't just only give props to the good stuff without acknowledging the shortcomings. And so, totally, everybody who is involved in this film deserves major props. And it came out, if you remember, this came out in summer 2015, and that was right when the issues of police violence were in the news a lot more. So, you know, nearly, they didn't time that astrologically or anything. It just so happened that worked out that way. Okay, so some little additional information. Some of the scenes were extraordinarily accurate. That scene they have at the beginning, historically, was very accurate. With the LAPD using the tank to demolish the house, that actually was how they did it back then. It was the LAPD was basically the first police department to really get into being militarized, and that was something. There was a law passed in '96 that accelerated the militarization of the police. Now it's more commonplace, but the LAPD kind of pioneered that back in the '80s at the height of the drug war. And actually, there's things you can go watch on YouTube. Were situations where Nancy Reagan, the president's wife, would ride shotgun with Daryl Gates, who was the LAPD chief at that time, on some of those raids, which kind of made you wonder, like, wow, the first lady's down here, something's up. And what they don't get into in the film, because it would be too far afield for the film, was what was going on with those properties. Well, if you ever get deep into doing some of the research, what happened is, of course, the drugs would come in, and the violence would break out, property values would drop, and then when you've got the military-style raids being conducted on these homes, A, a lot of times they'd get the wrong home, okay? B, even if they got the home of an evil drug dealer, what that would do is destroy the property values of all the homes on that block, because nobody's going to want to buy a home, or no normal family is going to want to buy a home on a street where there's military-style raids happening. Okay, so who is buying up those properties? Well, if you look into it, it's a lot of very, very big players, big players, and so they would buy those up, sit on them, and then wait for the prices to go up, over many years, and then flip them. But it wasn't just like regular families, like who were moving in. It was big corporations, including some names that you guys would all recognize. I'm not going to go into all that because it's a whole nother video. But because of that, also because of that scene where Eazy-E's like, well, the AKs come from Russia and the cocaine comes from Colombia, but none of us got a passport, so you might want to check the source. He was kind of alluding to the Boys in the Hood film, of course, which I mentioned that originally NWA was supposed to be the stars of Boys in the Hood. That was kind of made the film almost seem like a little bit like a sequel, because he was kind of alluding to a great scene in Boys in the Hood where a pre-Morpheus, Lawrence Fishburne, who was kind of channeling a Morpheus-type character in that film, takes them out to Cuba Gooding Jr. and I forget the other actor's name, but he was the football player in the movie. Takes them out to that billboard and explains, how things are actually going down. So, anyways, so if you're interested in that type of stuff, a couple other documentaries you can watch. Rise and Fall of Death Row is a documentary about Death Row Records, which you also saw in the film. American Drug War, that was a 2007 movie. And then the History Channel just came out with a new documentary series about the drug war, which was really good. And that was done by a guy who back in the 90s did a short documentary called Crack the CIA. You can look that up on YouTube. The one other thing that was also very accurate was the scene, and I can actually speak to this a little bit from experience, was, or first not experience, but first-hand knowledge, was the scene at Taft High School with Ice Cube, where he's getting on the bus and you see the kids with the BMWs. Well, I had actually went to junior high. It was called Portola, and it fed into 3 high schools, Taft, Birmingham, and Reseda. And I went to Birmingham first year and a half of high school, and what you saw there was Ice Cube at Taft, and that was a very accurate scene. You would have kids at the same school who were getting bussed in from Compton with kids who were the children of celebrities. Right, so that was an accurate depiction of how that actually exactly how it actually went down. So a few other things. Okay, I've got pretty much anybody in this film, because I grew up with that type of music swirling around me. Pretty much, I guess you could say it's like what Chris Rock says. The music you liked when you were around 12 or 13. Okay, that's the music you always liked. So when I was 12 or 13. We lived in San Fernando Valley. This was the music that was being played, and so half my astrology articles are about these sort of topics. So if you like the film, I've got a few other astrology articles that are relevant. So Dr. Dre, all right, he's an Aquarius with a Libra moon. I call that Doc Rendezvous and the G-Funk Astronaut. And I wrote a few years ago. It's up on the site. There's one that I have that I've been meaning to get to for ages. And that is on one of the main examples is Alonzo Williams. So you actually see him in the film, although it wasn't totally accurate how he was depicted. He's the club owner. Okay, now in real life, Alonzo Williams, he was the founder. The group was called the World Class Wrecking Crew, right? And they were kind of an electro-funk group, and a very big deal back in the 80s. And he was actually very supportive of NWA. He's depicted as the villain in the film, and when I was doing research for this article, I actually found some interviews with him, and you would think that if you were actually supportive of the group, but you were depicted in a kind of as a villain a little bit, you would think that you would be upset. He's not upset about it at all. He said he was just happy to be in the film, and he's got a book out called NWA, Not Without Alonzo. So I actually thought the scenes with him in it were some of the best scenes. There's also a little bit of humor. I just love this scene in the club where he goes over to Dr. Dre and he's like, don't play any of that, street, what stuff. I want these such and such, thinking about such and such, not pistols. Anyways, he's a Gemini communication with his moon in Aquarius, technology, futuristic stuff. So I call that Gemini Sun Aquarius Moon, Doc Discotech, and the Electro-Funk Dream Team, DJ Mac Magellan, and the Fly-By-Wire Super Freaks, Manic Subversive Hackers Troop, and the Hi-Fi Hornets Nest. So it's him, Alonzo Williams, Skunk Works, the Lockheed Martin experimental group at Lockheed Martin, and DEF CON, the hackers group. So all experimental forms of communication with that combo. I see Suge Knight. He saw him depicted in the film. He definitely was the villain, both in the film and probably in real life, at least it seems. Aries Sun, Sagittarius Moon. It's the two main examples I've got are him and Thomas Jefferson. And him and Thomas Jefferson have more in common than you might think. So that one I wrote. That was part of one of the earlier astrology articles I wrote called Aries Sun, Sagittarius Moon, the Outlaw Philosopher, and the Renegade Funketeer, the Above the Law Playwright, and the Take No Prisoner Street Preacher, High Seas, Freedom Rider, and the Soul Sonic Super Soldier. And actually, speaking of early astrology articles, now that I think about it, one of the first ones I wrote called it Libra Sun Scorpio Moon, the smooth talking spy and the deep cover diplomat, and one of the examples in there was Snoop, who of course you saw in the film also. I got one also planned, haven't written it yet, Cancer Sun Aries Moon about Supersonic. That's that song, one of my favorite songs of all time actually. By JJ Fad, Just Jammin' Fresh and Deaf. That was the all-star girl group who was in the film, probably deserved to be in the film, at least like for 2 seconds or something. So I got an article planned on that song, because albums and songs have release dates too. It's a Cancer Sun with the Aries Moon, 40/40 Major Leaguer in the Supersonic Girl group. So I'm going to call that one. Let's see, I got a few other notes. Okay, North Node Moon in Libra in the 9th. I remember when I first saw the chart for this, I wondered if it was going to result in any lawsuits, because North Node is in Libra, which is the scales of justice. It's in the 9th house, which is the legal system. And actually, there is a lawsuit. Jerry Heller's, he's suing them because he doesn't like how he was shown in the film. He was played by Paul Giamatti. And, look, I don't know all the details of how things went down. I didn't really think he came off that bad in the film. I thought, it seemed like he came off pretty good, maybe a little bit shady, but not terribly shady, and he wasn't, he came off there's a great scene that they kind of cut out. It was in the editor's edition, or director's cut. I actually got it on Amazon, where he's in the nightclub, right, and he's trying to promote them and get them, signed to a big label, and of course he stands up to the police in that scene, and I didn't think he came off that bad, So anyways, the other thing with North Node and Libra is you're also looking at reconciliation and playing to two sides. You got to play to both sides, okay? So the chart of a movie will describe the plot of the movie, but it will also describe the casting process. It'll describe the behind the scenes stuff that went into the production of the film. So it's not just the stuff that goes on screen. It's the entire situation. So of course on screen, we see opposites coming together. You got Eazy-E and Jerry Heller had to get on the same page, right? You see Eazy-E and Dr. Dre, or kind of opposites in a lot of ways. They had to get on the same page. You also saw, if you knew what to look for, the movie was trying to play to two equal but opposite audiences. That is, people who were into hip hop and who were going to know all the details, and maybe were even from LA, and were going to be able to see what was legit and what wasn't. And then they're also trying to play to more mainstream audiences at the same time. And then with the cast, you've got the guy who plays Dr. Dre. His name is I can't remember his name, but the guy who plays Dr. Dre, he's like a super well-trained actor. Like, he went to the fancy acting school, Juilliard, I think is the name. Like this very, very upper crust acting school, right? So he's, very into like the Shakespearean thing, and then he's there playing Dre, and you got the guy who plays Eazy-E as a kind of a newcomer. And so again, opposites coming together, right? Few other things. Cancer, Libra, a little extra tip is, Cancer's family, Libra's melodies, and one of the first things you notice about the film is how much Ice Cube looks like his dad. When the trailer first came out, I actually thought for a second that they had spliced in film from the 80s. He does such a good job. You're like, wait, did they somehow use some computeristic voodoo to get a 1988 version of Ice Cube in this 2015 film? But they didn't. It was his son, and his son just had his mannerisms and everything down. And I just read online that his son, O'Shea Jackson Jr., he's going to play Doc Ellis in a new movie. Now, Doc Ellis was a very politically outspoken baseball player back in the 70s. He's the most famous for dropping acid and then throwing a no-hitter. And he's a Pisces with an Aquarius moon. Well, Ice Cube's son is a Pisces with an Aquarius moon. So he's going to be perfect. He's going to be absolutely perfect to play that character. Let's see, a few other things. I got a few more notes here. The roller ring origins of NWA. Now, this was very interesting. I just came across this recently. So you see one of the scenes takes place at Skateland. And people, if you didn't live in LA at the time, you might have wondered, why was it taking place at a roller ring? Well, the roller ring was really big at that time. I was a kid, and going, people would always have their birthday parties at the roller skate place, right? And so there was a roller ring in near where the guys lived, and that was where they would perform. It was almost like a DJ situation, like a radio station or something. Is how they would do these roller rings. And you can actually, there was a New York Times article about this, and astrologically it was kind of interesting because Saturn was in Sagittarius. Of course, Saturn is structure. Sagittarius is the hips, which you use to do roller skating. So a roller ring is kind of a Saturn and Sag sort of place to build out your to start off as a foundation for your musical career. I just found that out recently. I kind of wish I'd known that when I wrote this article. This article's from a few years ago. It was in the second issue of Hexagon. The other thing that is interesting is, so I did all this research on the article. I wanted to make sure that I did a good job on it because it's relevant to the times that we're in. And also it was going in the print edition of Hexagon. So, a lot of resources were going into it. So I wanted to make sure it did the best job possible. So finished the article. It gets edited, and a couple different people look at it, make sure everything is up to snuff. Send it to the designer. We send it to the printer, right? So it's already finished and done. And like a week later, I find out that the last act that Eazy-E signed actually went to my high school, and they were seniors when I was a freshman. And the high school I went to, it was 3,000 people there, so I don't remember them at all. But I was just like, how is that even possible that I put all this time into this article, and then I find this really interesting side note out like a week after finishing the article? Like, this always seems to be how these things work. So anyways, that's about it. So that's Cancer, Sun, Libra, Moon, also a little bit about Saturn and Sag, North Node and Libra. So if you got any questions, editor at hexagonastrology.com, or just go ahead and post in the comments section. All right, that's about it. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.